Hello, and welcome to Gardener's World. And it's a world that, after a long winter, is surging into spring. Days are longer and brighter, and it's time to limber up for another glorious gardening year. So, for the next hour, we want to inspire you for the year ahead by looking back at some of the very best of Gardener's World. Coming up on today's programme, Arid visits a project in London, turning unloved corners into places filled with colour and joy.
So these were just two empty tarmac corners, and people threw washing machines and things in.
We meet someone who is taking their love of houseplants and gardening to new heights.
I am growing peppers, chilies, sweet potatoes, sweet corn, passion fruits, grapes. That sounds pretty ridiculous now when I'm saying it aloud.
Toby joins Sue in her garden to help out with a few jobs.
I've had this row of lavender for 10 years. It does tend to grow one side.
This all comes down to not pruning it hard enough.
Oh.
But all's not lost.
And I'm growing some vegetables in containers. You don't need an allotment or a veg plot. You don't even need a garden in order to grow some really... You can almost hear plants starting to grow. And there is a mounting sense, as Frances found out when she took a trip to the Isle of Man.
What I love about gardening is not just the thrill of seeing something growing well, but the challenge of getting it to grow at all. I'm about to meet some gardeners who face more challenges than most, and their plot, well, it's just here. This little row of terraced houses backs directly onto the beach. From the front, the houses look like fairly ordinary cottages. But from the back, they have this incredible view. And while being this close to the sea is pretty breathtaking, it also means these little gardens have to contend with everything the coast can throw at them. The gardens belong to the residents who are lucky enough to call this home. At number 11 is Helen Lee, who's lived here for more than 20 years. Her neighbours, Phil and Leslie Gurner, own a cottage 2 doors up, while Pauline Kringle and her husband have lived on the street for 40 years. First stop is Helen's garden. Oh my goodness, there's so much colour out here, it's amazing.
Well, for the summer season only.
Yeah.
But if you come on through, you'll see there's even more.
Oh, wow. You're always taking over the beach, haven't you?
We are playing King Canute here.
Yeah. What have you got?
So it's really it's in 2 halves. So there's broad beans, potatoes, cabbages and cauliflowers, chard, and then onions. So there's red onions and white onions. So that's about a year's supply.
That's you're sort of self-sufficient in a lot of vegetables.
It can.
Even here. The sea must actually come right up to here sometimes.
Sometimes it comes in a storm. If it comes up, it flattens the compost. You start from nothing once the last spring tide is finished. And then I bring in compost, topsoil, manure, and then slowly start planting. You have to, every year, be prepared to start again. You've got to be determined. But you get the reward. It's lovely.
Hi, Phil. Hi, Leslie.
Hi, Frances.
Phil and Leslie have lived here for 23 years and have seen their fair share of weather. It's idyllic here today. It's hard to imagine what it must be like when there's a storm actually happening, isn't it?
Yes,
yeah.
Completely different to in the winter when the storms hit.
In 2014, one of those winter storms battered the coastline, and Phil caught the drama and devastation on camera. But in 2002, they had their worst storm ever.
We had a huge storm, and that basically destroyed everything. Everything that's here, there was nothing left. Basically, all the grass was just covered in stones. It tore everything out.
Yeah.
That's our worst one.
The storms is actually what brought this community together and got you sort of working on this as a big cooperative, isn't it?
That's right, yes.
The rebuilding was a communal effort to give ourselves somewhere to grow stuff and get together and get it back again.
A whole load of us coming up with wheelbarrows all up and down the path here.
Really?
Yes, for about 3 days. You've just got to get on with it. And that's what we all do. We all come together and help each other.
But you're real plants people, aren't you? It's not just the lawn. Back in there, you've got loads of beautiful flowers and on huge spikes that are still standing, even in the wind.
Yeah, even in the wind, which we've had plenty of this year. Now, I love the lupins and my delphinium, which I planted last year because my mum wanted it. And I really thought it wouldn't survive the sea salt and being on the beach. But it has, and it survived the weather and the wind.
But not just flowers as well, a whole load. You've got beautiful fuchsia hedge, a conifer, and loads of tropical plants and palms as well, so a real collection there.
Yeah, the conifer, after the storm of 2014, while we were clearing up, there was a closed cone. Don't know where it came from, but it was on the beach and I kept it. And it opened the next year, so I planted some of the seeds and got a conifer tree, which is now planted in the garden.
Yeah. And it just goes to show, actually, that if you grow something from seed in situ, it's a lot tougher, because I guarantee you, if you'd bought that conifer that size and planted it there, it would not survive.
No, that's right.
But here it is, and it's grown to be tough and able to cope.
Yeah, yeah.
What a lovely story.
These beachside gardens are a real labour of love for this neighbourly lot. And when I say labour, I'm talking about proper physical lifting and shifting. For Pauline and Helen, though, all this is par for the course when you have a garden on the beach.
Careful, Helen.
What if it's something huge? I mean, you can't wheelbarrow anything, can you?
I have got a wheelbarrow.
Have you?
I have. But as long as there's plenty of air in the tide, you can sort of bounce it along the stones. It has been done.
Together, these neighbours are doing something rather wonderful. They haven't just created a lovely garden and grown some great produce. They've also grown their own little community here. And that's definitely something to celebrate.
These little beach gardens may not be the biggest in the world, but when it could all be washed away at the whim of the weather or of the tides, then it takes an awful lot of patience and courage and very deep preserves of positive spirit to keep on gardening. And I'm just filled with admiration for all of them.
Before the results started to look pretty good. Last summer, we visited a gardener who used some innovative tricks to get the best possible results.
I think gardening is all about experimentation because it's impossible to have perfect results with everything. You can almost always find a way of making something better. And there's always something that you haven't quite mastered that you want to keep persevering with until you get it just right and you just nail it. And that's quite satisfying when you've done that. My name's Annika, and this is my allotment in the heart of Bristol. So I've been on this site now for 4 years. Quite fortunate here, really. It's right in the city of Bristol, and yet it's a green oasis full of wildlife. I live in a flat, so having that outdoor space like this is quite an asset. It is my haven here. So I work as a vet, and about 10 years ago I started working in the UK overseas territories quite a bit, like the Falkland Islands, Tristan da Cunha, Pitcairn. It means I'm often away for a month or two at a time. It's meant I've had to try and set my allotment up to automate itself. So I'm always looking for new gadgets and accessories to automate my systems and try and help my plants go further. So this is my greenhouse. This is a hydraulic rod that basically automatically opens the window when it heats up, and then when it cools down, it closes it by itself. I've also got wicking pots and system in here, so there's planters with a reservoir at the bottom which has feed and water in it. That wicks up via capillary matting to the plants, so they can just use water as they need it. It'll sustain them for about 2 weeks. The results are phenomenal. Chilies especially seem to like just having the right level of water, not getting too wet or too dry. And the last thing I've added is a new treat to myself, is a solar-powered hydroponic system. You know, it's what professionals use, so I don't think I would have the whole allotment on a hydroponic, because that's a farm, basically. But I saw the kit, and it's pretty cool. I had to try it out, because, you know, it's something different. I'm always looking for new ideas, new methods, new tricks to try and push my plants to the next level, try and get better results. I don't like to just grow something so the plant grows and produces a crop. I like to get that thrill of having a bountiful harvest. So, you know, a plant or a tree is so laden in fruit, it can barely take its weight. I mean, that's the allotment dream. One issue that I was having with my sweet corn was that birds and rats would get to the cobs quite soon before they were ripe, and I have a simple solution for that, to just put old socks over them to protect them, and it works brilliantly. I've not lost a single one this year. So this is my root veg bed. I've always found it quite hard to get good results with things like carrots and parsnips. To get a straight, thick root with no pest damage is actually quite difficult. So I built this about 3 years ago. It's about 1.5 feet high. The results pretty much speak for themselves. I keep a computer record of everything I do here. Just write a few lines about what I've done on a particular day, what I've sown, what I've planted, what I've harvested, just so I can refer back to it in the future and see when I did something. I know it sounds almost a bit like an obsession, but I couldn't manage without it now. I think I'm just a bit of a fussbot, to be honest. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, which has its downsides. Me just spend 5 hours trying to prune one tree perfectly, then I have time to do the other 10. I don't tend to do things by half measures. It's got to be all or nothing, really. There's something about having an allotment that gives me a sense of freedom. I've got a blank canvas here where I can experiment. It is an infinite hobby. There's always something new to try. There's always some new crop to try, some new variety, some new fad that's coming up. I don't really like to just stagnate. I like to sort of keep going and keep trying something new. Just push the boundaries a bit further, just to see what you can get away with.
Growing plants in containers has always been an important part of our summer display here at Longmeadow. This is a hydrangea called Runaway Bride. And there are lots of really good things about it. It flowers, and it's easy to grow, and I've got a couple here growing in pots. But the real stars that you can't miss are the lilies. This is Casablanca. It's about the biggest white lily you can grow, and trust me, the fragrance is heavenly. It's just filling the air. But it isn't very subtle. It's very white, it's very big, the fragrance is very loud, it's brash. And I considered putting it in the Paradise Garden, but actually it would be the wrong choice. It's too overwhelming for there. So, but here it works well, and a tip is if you've got a very white plant, or any plant that's very monochromatic, put it against a dark background, and that will work much better than if you try and blend it in, because they're really hard to blend. This agapanthus is performing superbly in quite a small pot, really. It's called Bridal Bouquet. They do need watering, so I water this every week. And when the flowering is over, cut off the seed heads and then feed it once a week with liquid seaweed. And go on doing that until autumn, and that will ensure that next year's display is equally as good. It's time to revisit one of your gardens now, and this one, near Portsmouth, was absolutely crammed full of pots.
Hello, my name's Jenny Warner and we have a very small garden here, so we make the most of old pots and we keep all our plants in different old pots and rotate them round so we maximise the colour from them. Part of the garden is about 10 feet across, just outside the back door. The other part of the garden about 20 feet square. But one thing I wanted to show you today was our auricular theatre and how we made this auricular theatre from an old fire screen. So what it has, we used the original screen, kept the old wooden handle. We had to extend it slightly, add in a bottom and a recess, 2 simple wooden shelves, and keep our auriculars in here. And this is an east-facing wall, so it keeps the auriculars nicely out of the sun and out of the rain as well. This shelf here, which is particularly pretty, I think. So I move them around, and down here I've got my sort of extra stock. As they come into flower, I move these up to the auricular theatre. So I keep those on an old garden sieve, so they're nicely drained, because that's the risk with auriculars in particular. You don't want them to be in cold water. And that's our auricular theatre. We're calling in to look at our little garden, small space but packed to the brim, and we utilise every inch of it.
Now, lots of us grow vegetables, but we tend to slightly overlook growing herbs, and yet herbs are something you can use in every meal, and you don't need a garden. They grow really well in pots. And I'm going to make a little Mediterranean herb garden in a container. Now, this is a terracotta pot, which is much better for Mediterranean herbs than plastic, because it doesn't hold water so well. And the biggest enemy of Mediterranean herbs is sitting in cold, wet soil. Get a curved piece of pot. You put it over the top of the hole, which doesn't stop the drainage in any way, but does stop the compost falling through. Now, compost for Mediterranean herbs is absolutely critical. And I'm doing what I say you never should do, and I'm recycling spent compost. It's extremely gritty. And what you want for Mediterranean herbs is poor growing conditions. So spent compost is for them ideal if it is gritty enough. Now we'll put some in the bottom. Now the easiest way to do that is simply to buy some horticultural grit and mix it 50-50 with a normal peat-free compost. That is the base that it's going to grow in. Now, I want a centerpiece of rosemary, and this is a particularly upright variety called Miss Jessop's Upright, and will thrive in this environment. So that will go in the middle, and that will grow about double that size. And then I'm going to have some sage. Now, you've got ordinary sage. This is Salvia officinalis. You can get pineapple sage, you can have purple sage, and although it looks good, I don't think tastes as good as a green sage. And best of all, you've got a narrow leaf sage. Now, this I've grown from seed, and although the leaves are very narrow, they're absolutely delicious. So we'll pop that there like that, and in fact, we've got room for 2 sages, I think. Now, we definitely want some thyme. And like sage, there are a number of different types of thyme. You can get a compact form, which has got softer growth. And of course, it's the soft growth that you want. And just by touching that, I can tell you the fragrance is fantastic. So I'm going to plant that in there. And there's also a lemon thyme, which many people say is best for cooking. So I'm going to add that in too. And this is quite a large pot, but we'll find space for it over here, like that. I definitely want some of the oregano. It spreads like a weed in the herb garden, but we let it, because when it flowers, the bees love it. This is a prostrate rosemary. prostrate rosemary wants to grow sideways, and there's no reason why you can't grow it to hang over the side of a pot. And now I'm going to put some soil around that. And then use a lot of horticultural grit. And it's not just a top dressing, this is actually right around the roots. And it means there's just no risk of them sitting in too much moisture, because the water will drain through that and away. Now, it is important that you put this in the sunniest spot that you have. They really cannot have too much sunshine or heat. Last year, we met a gardener who was successfully growing a wide range of edible plants in a very limited space.
In the balcony garden, I am growing lots of different types of tomatoes. And then I have peppers, chilies, sweet potatoes, spinach, sweet corn, passion fruits, grapes. That sounds pretty ridiculous now when I'm saying it aloud. I haven't actually done that before. Wow. My name's Jason. I live in city centre of Manchester and I'm on the 18th floor. It's a south-facing balcony. It's roughly about 10 meters long. What I chose to do is just get one flower, and I thought that would just really brighten up the space a little bit. And it happened to be a marigold. And then I wasn't happy with just the marigold. And then a year and a half later, it's turned into this jungle, like it does. The microclimate for the balcony is completely different to a ground level gardener. So we had a heat wave a while back, and I think we were having temperatures of around about 32 degrees at ground level, but up here it was 42, 46. And so the stress that puts the plants under, those fluctuations are really, really difficult to contend with. But it's also a unique challenge because it works in reverse. In winter, I don't get frost on the balcony, so I can extend my growing season, and I will still be able to harvest tomatoes all throughout Christmas. Who does that? With the indoor garden, I have a particular type of plant that I like. It can't just be something with a green leaf. It has to be something with a particular shape, or a vine, or a size. There's got to be something kind of unique about the plant. I think naming some of my plants has probably helped me to see them as part of my family. Like Chad, for example, he is my monstera, my very first houseplant. I was going to cut and propagate him, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. It's pretty ridiculous. So now I've ended up with multiple plants, and I just have to leave them to do what they want to do. I don't like the word suffer or struggle, but I have to deal with anxiety and depression, and so sometimes I will wake up and I will not want to get out of bed. It's just a fact. And then what keeps me going, or what will push me to make that first step to get out of bed, is knowing that I need to go and water Simon, I need to go and look after Chad, I need to go and get Teddy ready, and it's just having those little bits and pieces. And because I'm kind of giving back to nature a bit, it kind of helps me as a person, and then I feel a lot better and can start my day. With this particular elephant here, when I brought it home, the leaves snapped and it only had this leaf left. It was looking pretty miserable, but I decided to continue working on it, and feeding it, giving it water, and now it has produced this larger leaf and it's now producing a new one. So I think because at times I might feel broken, I would look at this plant and feel kind of connected to it in a way, and so it's kind of a reminder to me of what I need to do to take care of myself. I need to put the work in myself in order to bounce back. Okay, yeah, I am wearing wellies and I'm more than aware that I do not have real grass on this balcony, but I want to be a real gardener too, so I'm going to wear my wellies. This is ridiculous. Essentially, it is a glass house, so even if it is raining, that balcony doesn't get any rain on it whatsoever. So I still have to go out and water that balcony every few days or so. What I have learned is that I need to grow what I can grow. And so I have some plants that have got a darker foliage, like my Black Magic Colocasia, and I have some cannas, and they absolutely thrive off the sunlight. You have to know that your own small space is unique to you, and you just need to figure out what works. My plants in general, they give me peace, they give me joy. If you were to walk onto my balcony is in essence an extension of the flooring of my apartment. So that means that structurally I can have a lot more out on my balcony than other people. Some other balconies are essentially attached on, so I'm extremely lucky that I can have this out on my balcony.
Still to come on today's programme. Kate Bradbury has some tips on how to attract more wildlife to our gardens.
Unlike frogs and toads, newts lay eggs individually and they fold them into the leaves of plants like brooklime and water forget-me-not. So I've planted in the hope that I can attract newts to come to the garden.
And Toby joins Sue in her garden to help out with a few seasonal jobs.
Oh, look at that. Wow. That is superb, isn't it?
Yeah, we've got a new one there, look.
But first we're off to West London, where Arit met a gardener who has a mission to bring colour to unloved urban spaces.
Karen Liebridge started Abundance London 12 years ago to champion green spaces and bring local people together to green up the tattier corners of Chiswick, which had long remained disused and abandoned. What's the idea behind all this?
Well, it's trying to do something. So it's finding little patches, little corners that are wasted, that could be little pockets of beauty and biodiversity. And we need these little pockets, both for insect life and for people. And you can see people walking past and smiling as they look at it.
Karen or local residents spot an area they want to improve, and it's Karen who gets permissions from the landowner or council. Together, they've revived over 25 spaces, ranging from a few square feet to larger areas like this one at Turnham Green Tube Station. Karen brought in designer Jutta Wagner to design a low-maintenance perennial meadow. It looks wonderful because there's geraniums, scabies, nautia, lovely alliums popping up. It's really wonderful.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased it turned out like this.
This type of planting, you know, has to self-sustain surely in an area like this.
Yes, because these plants, they are really happy without much watering once they are established. So in the first year, we had a guy from that pizza place who was watering it. And then, but last year and this year, the team didn't water this bed yet at all. And this is really quite something. But that's how it has to be here.
Yeah.
It's really nice to have all these plants here and all the bees and the butterflies and everything here in this noisy environment.
Looks fabulous. I guess we better get on and get it in.
Yeah.
It's just
yes,
fantastic.
Yes.
The insects aren't the only ones to appreciate the profusion of plants. Do you often walk this way through the high street?
So I look in the local area and it really makes a massive change to the area. So it's been quite run down. There were lots of litter and now it's just a bright area to spend time at.
Getting public projects like this off the ground takes tenacity, and Karen has plenty of that.
It's not smooth sailing. You have to be resilient, but you also have to not take no for an answer and keep going for it.
The great thing about Karen's scheme is that people can get involved who don't have gardens or who just want to cheer up their corner of the city. Using donated plants and some grown from seeds, Karen also involves young people who are doing their Duke of Edinburgh Awards. Isaac, with the help from his dad Tom, is beautifying a plot which was badly in need of attention beside a major road.
Well, I have to say, guys, you've been putting your back into preparing this bed.
Well, it was very difficult initially. The ground was horribly tough, especially as you go up. We actually had to acquire a pickaxe. A lot of
Pickaxe for gardening?
Pickaxe for gardening to get through all the roots and the rubble. It's a good place to do it because there's so many people that walk past, and hopefully it encourages other people to do the same sort of thing, maybe.
But it's in highly residential streets that Karen and her volunteers are making a huge impact on the local neighbourhood.
Wow. It's so joyous. What was here before?
So these were just two empty tarmac corners, this one and that one. There used to be a willow tree in each corner, which the council had to take out. And then it was just empty tarmac. And people threw washing machines and things in. The trees had made cracks in the tarmac.
Yeah.
So we started planting into the cracks. We added some compost and it worked. But it's literally, if you look, it's tarmac.
Karen has inspired so many people, and one of them is Jenny. They've been gardening together for the last 15 years.
As part of a member of the community, I enjoy working anything community-led. I'm there.
Is it the people, the plants, the lot of
everything, everything. And what gives me joy is people appreciate what you do, because everybody passes when they see you watering or weeding or whatever. Oh, thank you so much, it looks so good, and you know, that sort of thing. And for me, it offers me therapeutic value, because I've not been quite well, so it's a chance for me to get out among nature and, you know, just enjoy nature and feel good as well.
That's it. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? When you don't feel so good yourself, it's nice to be around other people. And these plants, I mean, how wonderful does this look?
Exactly. It cheers you up. And boast to people that I live in an area which is so natural. I call it an oasis in the middle of a city.
Where does the motivation come to do all of this?
In general, it's just creating little pockets of defiant beauty. You see people walk past and they're just happy and they like it.
Well, look
and
at
it's
it.
full of insects as well, you know, bees and butterflies and stuff there.
Well, I have to say, it's incredibly impressive.
What Karen demonstrates is we can all plant up those overlooked nooks and crannies of our cities and bring nature closer to us and making our neighbourhoods better places to be in. All we need is an ounce of her can-do attitude.
Last winter, I revamped the damp garden, making a new boggy border and adding lots of new plants. By early summer, it was starting to look transformed. Lots of lush foliage from the rheum and the hostas and the damara. Now we're starting to get some colour. The persicaria has got these white plumes of flower. We've got the yellow of the lysimachia. The candelabra primrose are flowering, and they will get much better as they get bigger. Now, I'm struggling with this extremely ungainly pair of waders because it's time now to give some attention to the pond itself.
And the key thing that I need to attend to is the yellow flag, Iris pseudochorus, which, although I love because it's beautiful and great for wildlife, it can be very invasive. So I need to get into the pond and get to work.
can see it's quite a mat. Now, I would stress that I love the flowers of these. Bright yellow, fleur-de-lis. And this sort of really brilliant display that you get at the sort of beginning and middle of June is wonderful, and I wouldn't want to be without it. So it's a question of controlling it and cutting it back a bit rather than getting rid of it. I don't see it as a weed, I see it as a glorious plant that I'm very happy to have in my pond. But, like some other glorious plants, it can become invasive. Now, when you take anything out of the water, and I mean anything at all, whether it's algae or a large plant, don't put it straight into a wheelbarrow or a container to take to the compost heap, because there may well be little creatures in amongst it. So you put them on the edge and leave it for 24 hours so that dragonfly nymphs, water beetles, any little creature can crawl back into the water. The truth is, I'm aware that by cutting them, they will regrow. The only way to get rid of it is to pull out the rhizome, which is in there. Can you see all those roots? If I want to reduce it substantially, I need to cut that back. There we go. See that? There you have a mass of root in there, and these great fleshy rhizomes. Can you see where I've cut? There. And that will reduce them a bit. I'm going to work my way around, which is quite tricky because the depths are very variable, and reduce the iris by half. That will open out some space, let more light in, more room for other plants to breathe, but still leave plenty of cover for wildlife and also the beauty of their flowers next spring. Now, when we visited Kate in June, her pond was positively overflowing with life.
When our gardens start buzzing, it's so satisfying, knowing we're providing good food and homes for insects. But when I built my pond, my dream was for newts, toads and frogs. Frogs are the next layer up in the food chain and definitely a gardener's friend. They breed in ponds and will sniff out a new one to see if it suits.
And guess what? The frogs found my pond for the first time this spring and laid masses and masses of frog spawn. And now my pond is full of tadpoles.
Eggs and tadpoles make great food for other species, so only about 1 in 50 grows into a froglet.
And when the froglets emerge from the pond in midsummer, they need damp, dark habitat to shelter from predators, which is why I've made them this log pile, which is less than 2 metres away from the pond. But then when they're in the garden, they in turn eat loads of pests and other beasties, like small slugs and snails, flying insects and beetles. So it's a win-win situation for the frogs and the gardeners.
I've fringed the end of the pond with plants like cranesbill to give the froglets cover as they clamber out. But I'm hoping this water forget-me-not and brooklime will also attract new visitors.
The reason they're here is because newts use them to lay their eggs. Unlike frogs and toads, newts lay eggs individually and they fold them into the leaves of plants like brooklime and water forget-me-not. So I've planted in the hope that I can attract newts to come to the garden. They're not here yet, but just like the frogs, if you build it, they'll come. And when they do come, I'll know they're here because the leaves of these plants will be folded over, each one of them containing a little newt egg.
As most amphibians walk into your garden, the more gaps under gates or holes in walls you can give them, the happier they'll be. In a little garden, providing homes and food all year can be a challenge, but there are tricks. This pulmonaria has been feeding bees in the spring, but now it's gone over, and by cutting it back, I can fit in new pollinating plants.
So this is poached eggplant. It's an annual with white and yellow flowers, absolutely beloved of solitary bees. I'm going to plant a few just around the pulmonaria here. It's going to fluff up, it's going to flower, it's going to provide loads of nectar and pollen. And then when the pulmonaria needs the space back, these will have gone over and I can just whip them out. I grow loads of these. They're really easy to grow from seed. They're so useful for bees, and I can just dot them around whenever there's a space that needs filling.
They'll definitely go here too once I've chopped back this leggy cerinthe or honeywort. And since I built my garden, it's also inspired neighbours to plant up theirs, so there's even more colour nearby. As well as making more space for plants, there are ways to provide even more flowers.
This is a hanging basket with a twist, because I've made it specifically for wildlife. It's a bit of an experiment. I've got a bit of red clover in the middle, and then draped around the edges I've got more poached eggplant, and then tucked into the sides here I've got bird's foot trefoil, which I'm hoping will just drape down like big curtains. This is just coming into flower now. The poached eggplant here has got loads of buds on it, and it will probably be in flower for between 4 and 6 weeks. But for the bees that come after, I'm planting up a second hanger basket with smaller plants, which will carry the season through and provide bees with a really good source of pollen and nectar until late summer.
Bird's foot trefoil is a really good all-rounder, loved by bees and the caterpillars of the common blue butterfly.
This is red clover, which is a fantastic bee plant. And the flowers are composite flowers, and they have long corollas or flower tubes, so they're perfect for long-tongued bumblebees. So the really big fat bumblebees you see going into foxgloves, those are called garden bumblebees, and they've got really long tongues. And then the little gingery ones are called common carders. They're the ones that will visit the red clover, hopefully in my hanging basket.
No garden is too small to attract wildlife. And it's funny where they go, because even here in the Paradise Garden, which after all is certainly not intended to be a wildlife garden, it's completely decorative, the crab apples, which for the moment are just anonymous little green berries, but by autumn they will have swollen and become this lovely orangey red, and the blackbirds fall on them. They absolutely love them. And I would say if you've got a small garden and you want a tree, think about a crabapple. There are lots to choose from. Some are very small, some grow larger, but they all have really good blossom. They tend to have good shapes, are easy to prune if you want to prune them, and of course then have the beautiful crabapples, which are decorative, good for you to eat, and the birds adore them. Our gardens provide a vital habitat for all kinds of birds, insects and mammals. And Charlotte Hill has done everything she could to encourage the widest range of wildlife possible in her garden.
Hello, my name's Charlotte, and I'd like to give you a hedgehog's eye tour of my garden here in York. My husband and I moved here in 2014, and at the time the garden was just a blank space with a broken fence. It wasn't long before we realised we had hedgehogs in the area, so when we fixed the fence, we made sure we put a hole in so that the hedgehogs could get in and out. We also bought a wildlife camera so that we could see what was coming into the garden and put out little bowls of food. At the back of the garden, we built a log pile to cater for insects and beetles that the hedgehogs like to eat. But we also started noticing other animals coming into the garden. At the bottom of the shed, some mice have taken up residence. But we've also had some more unusual visitors through the hedgehog hole. In the middle of the garden, we dug a pond and made sure it had a beach so that hedgehogs could climb out if they fall in. But this also brought loads of frogs into the garden, which helped us with the slugs and snails that we used to have a problem with.
My philosophy for planting this end of the garden is the more plants I put in, the less weeding I have to do. But it also gives really good cover for any creatures that crawl out of the pond and protection against any other animals that may be around on the prowl. And finally, in the back corner of the garden, if you pass through all this undergrowth, we built a hedgehog house. And of course, no hedgehog tour would be complete without seeing the garden at night. Thank you for visiting our garden. Bye-bye.
By late summer, Longmeadow is ablaze with colour. And the Jewel Garden in particular hits its peak. I love salvias, and I've got half a dozen different ones here in the Jewel Garden, but you know, the one that gives me as much pleasure as any is the most common of the lot. This is Salvia amistad, and it has become phenomenally popular, and there's really good reason for that. One, it's pretty easy to grow. Two, it's a glorious rich purple, and three, and best of all, those purple flowers are produced from June right through till Christmas. It is incredible how the flowers just keep coming and coming. And at the moment, it's looking particularly good with this Rudbeckia. I just love this combination of the yellow flare at the end of the petals and then this velvety brown as it gets nearer to that central boss. Of course, we should all delight in our successes. But at the same time, there are always jobs to be done to make next year's garden look as good as it possibly can. Toby joins Sue at her place in October to help out with some jobs, starting with some lopsided lavender.
This all comes down to not pruning it hard enough.
Ooh, wasn't I?
No,
okay.
you've got to be quite mean with lavender. It's quite a good saying that you cut them back by an eighth in the 8th month of the year.
I just haven't been hard enough.
No, and if you do that every year, you rejuvenate it.
Oh, I think we could do it then. Do you think they're worth it?
No, you can't do it to these.
Oh.
Oh no, the sad thing is, once they get long in the tooth like this, that's it. What we can do is take cuttings and create new plants to replace the old. I don't know about you, but I'm easily distracted. And when I go out into the garden with one task, I start on that and then I find myself drifting off onto something else. So when I'm taking cuttings, what I always do is take a bag with a few drops of water in it. And that way, when the cuttings go into there, if that's sealed up, because it's 100% humidity in the bag, they'll last all day.
Lovely. So it doesn't matter if if you've left them under a bush somewhere.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It's a life saved, if you like. And they're dead easy to do. Just take a non-flowering stem.
Yeah.
Nip it below a bud, because that seals then, and then you get roots growing from where the buds were. And then it's just strip off the bottom half. That's it. And that, stuck into compost, roots within weeks.
I lost a load when I overwintered them, so I do need loads.
Let's pot them up. Sue and I are pushing the cuttings into gritty compost. We're not making a hole, because if you push them in, they root much better. We squeeze as many in as we can without the leaves touching and give them a good soak. Right, what else you got for me?
I've got a really tough job for you next, Toby.
Oh.
Really tough.
Where is it?
It's at the end of the garden there.
Right. Ah, here we are.
This is my huge phormium, which I love, but the only problem is, as you can see, it's coming over the steps, causing a bit of a health hazard to poke you in the eye.
Do you know, I live with this at home because I've planted phormiums in haste. Right near paths, and there's a rule of thumb with any shrubs, including big sort of grassy subjects like this, is that you always have 2 metres of space between them.
Ooh.
Now, these got 2 metres between them, but not 2 metres between the roots of this and the path, and so you're always going to have this tumbling over effect. It's just something you can't really get rid of. The game plan is to whip away all the stuff around the edge, but right back to the base of the plant. And then, if I can, I'm going to get into the middle, and that should stop these side ones flopping down as the middle grows. fibres of this get right in the blade. Oh, Sue, look at this. This is good news. You see in there where the plant's mounded up and it's grown into itself, and big chunks of it, as I hoped.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I can see the roots.
Yeah, it's rooted. And if I can cut that away through there,
yeah,
we'll get a whole new section of plant that can be put into the ground somewhere else, 2 metres away from a path.
Okay.
And then this won't be such a problem in future. So yeah, we're catching it at the right time, I think.
Oh, that is great. Oh, look at that.
Yeah, look.
Wow. That is superb, isn't it?
Yeah, we've got a new one there, look. Sue's formium has had a good trim. And if she wants to, she can replace it with a new plant grown on in a pot until it's big enough for planting out. Wow, Sue, this is impressive.
Yes, this is my new build, my raised bed and cold frame.
This craftsmanship's incredible.
Well, this is my son's a carpenter, and occasionally I manage to persuade him to come and help me. And what's quite, it's all made of recycled stuff left over from my potting shed, and so it's lightweight. It's got made from corrugated plastic, and
all the mod cons. Look at that.
When he built it and put it on, we realised I couldn't reach over it, so he's made me this sort of sliding entry system.
That is something all cold frames should have, actually.
We're lining the cold frame with plastic to stop the plants rooting in the soil below, and covering it with locally sourced white cockle shells to reflect as much light as possible during the winter.
I've got some foxglove seedlings, I think that's what they are, over there. Can they go in the cold frame?
Yes, they can, and they are foxglove seedlings. And you know, I reckon grown in there, with the lid put down when it's particularly cold, and if they're potted up before Christmas, these will flower next year.
Do you think so? Because I thought I'd left it till they were so tiny.
They are small, but it's amazing how they catch up in an environment like this. You can just really steal a march. And do you know what colour they are?
Well, I'm hoping they're white, but I got my labels mixed up, so I don't know how to tell.
Well, purple foxgloves have very glossy green leaves that are often pointed and they're smooth, whereas ones like this that are pale and have this little furry top to them, you know they're going to be a white form or perhaps an apricot, but certainly lighter than the purples.
But that's a really useful tip, isn't it? Furry ones are light.
Do you know, that is really gorgeous, isn't it?
Yes, I'm very proud. Well, thanks for helping me with that, Toby.
Well, thanks for inspiring me. This is brilliant.
Yeah, and you can put it on top of any raised bed you've got. You can turn it into a cold frame.
Yeah, genius. Genius.
Come on, there's a good girl. Throughout the year, we try and share with you as much horticultural advice, wisdom, experience, sometimes some failings, as we possibly can, so you can make your gardens as good as they can be. But there comes a point in the gardening year when all of that pales into insignificance around the sheer loveliness of gardens. So my advice to you, based on a lifetime of horticultural experience, is stop and just enjoy your gardens. And we've got lots more for the gardening year to come, with our brand new series of Gardener's World that starts next Friday on BBC Two at 8 o'clock. So join us then. Bye-bye.